Genocide. What's kidlit got to do with it? I don't know about you, but up until recently, when I thought of children's literature, I thought mainly of books that were written to educate children, teach them to read, teach them their colors, basic educational stuff. Books like Dr. Seuss, or Winnie the Pooh, or Disney princess stories. I basically thought of books that were written for the pleasure of children or their basic educational purposes. I was unaware that there was an entire collection of books for children, even elementary age children, that deals with the subject of genocide. But why genocide? It seems like an awfully intense subject to discuss with young children, much less write books for them to read about. But then I started thinking about it. Did you know that there are still people today who don't know anything about the Holocaust? Did you know that some people don't think it even took place? Did you know that there are people who know about the Holocaust, but they don't think any other acts of genocide have taken place since? What can we do to change this? Where do we start? Why not kids lit? Remember those PSA commercials on TV that had the slogan, "The more you know"? It always appeared on the screen after a well-produced PSA featuring a famous person talking about a particular social issue, such as tolerance or mentoring or bullying, the prevention of violence. This programming was targeted to the youngest children, the youngest audience. The thought was that by educating the youngest of society, it could help stop these problems. Why can't Kids Lit do the same for genocide? So the question is, how can a child relate to the Holocaust? If we want the children of today to prevent the genocide of tomorrow, we need to have them relate to the issue. For a small child to grasp such a big subject, what better way to start than to write a story from a child's perspective? By telling the story from a child's perspective, the reader can relate. The child then considers, what if that was me? The first example is a story called Hidden. Written by the authors, it tells the story of a young Jewish girl living in France during the time of the Holocaust. The story is told by a grandmother to her granddaughter. It is her story. The details include the type of things that young girls and boys are interested in, like their interaction between them and their schoolmates, and how they get along. Where it differs is through the introduction of the Star of David, required to be worn by Jewish people at that time. The young girl's father tries to make her feel better about wearing it, saying that they were going to become sheriffs. But of course, all that soon changed. Once they began wearing the star, they were singled out and treated differently. The situation quickly devolves as her parents are taken away, and she is rescued from her hiding place by kind French neighbors. Unfortunately, they also pay the price for helping her, and she and the female neighbor are forced to run away and hide after her husband is arrested by the police. The little girl has hopes of being reunited with her own parents, and by the end of the book, she at least gets her mother back. She never sees her father again. While dealing with a very serious subject, young children can relate to this book and the way the young girl feels about being separated from her parents and even having to call the female neighbor mom while they're hiding. The book even provides a fairly realistic illustration of what her mother would have looked like having just been released from the concentration camp. Certainly is not your typical children's book, but any child can relate to not being liked in school, for being different, and being separated from their parents. By reading this book, children of today will hopefully look at a way the Jews were treated and want to make sure they don't do the same towards others who are different. Children can make a difference. In the book The Cats in Krasinski Square, author Karen Hess tells the story of life in Warsaw, Poland after the Germans invaded and separated the Jews into an area called the ghetto. It is told from the perspective of a young Jewish child, a young girl who escaped the ghetto and pretends to be Polish in order to stay safe and be free. Again, this book places a child in the shoes of the protagonist so they can relate to the subject matter. The story is simple enough that the youngest girl can understand it, or excuse me, the youngest child can understand it, and is written in a way to keep their interest. Starts off with a young girl playing with stray cats that come through the cracks in the wall, which we soon learn separates Warsaw from the ghetto. The young girl and her sister escaped, burned their clothes and the Jewish armbands they were forced to wear that singled them out, and are living as Polish girls to protect their identities. However, they spend their time finding ways to provide food and clothes to their friends on the other side of the wall. The book empowers young readers by showing the youngest girl coming up with the solution to throw off the Gestapo by gathering the stray cats and releasing them at the train station as a distraction so they can complete their mission of delivering the aid to the people on the other side of the wall. In the book Nikki and Vera, young readers are shown that children can grow into people who make a difference. The story is based on a true story and is told from the perspective of two different people. An English boy who grew to be a brave man during the time of the Holocaust, and a Jewish girl whose life was saved as a result. To be relatable to children, the book starts with Nicky as a small boy who likes pets and has hobbies. It then tells the story of Vera beginning in 1938 at 10 years old when she and her family were one of the few Jewish families living in Prague. When the Germans arrived, they fled with hardly anything. Her parents heard of an Englishman who was helping children leave Czechoslovakia to escape the Germans. That Englishman was Nicky. England would allow refugees under the age of 17 to come. The story tells how he coordinated the rescue of the children, including young Vera. 669 children reached London safely. Nicky had kept records of them, but he never told anyone what he did. Years later, his wife found them and arranged with a TV show for him to be honored by some of the children who were now grown adults. 669 children would have not survived. How can a young child relate to the Holocaust? On a personal level. Many children take music lessons. Many of those music lessons are piano lessons. They may not enjoy the lessons or see them as a privilege. What if they couldn't take piano lessons just because of their heritage? The story Hold On to Your Music is based upon a true story of one of the Jewish children who escaped to England and who was cared for on Willesden Lane. She loved the piano prior to her escape, and her mother wisely told her to hold on to her sheet music when she fled. When she arrived at Willesden Lane, she discovered they had a piano. She played the piano to the delight of the others, and even played it to drown out the sound of the bombing outside. It's a wonderful story of determination as the young girl goes on to study at the Royal Academy of Music, even though she is a Jewish refugee, and obtains success. She did what her mother said. She held on to her music. So there's kid lit about the Holocaust, but what about genocide in general? How do we address what has taken place since then? Some people are not aware that other horrific genocides have taken place around the world since the Holocaust in the 1940s. In the late 70s, Pol Pot and the Khmer Rouge political party attempted to purify Cambodia of Western culture and city life, religion, by murdering different ethnic groups. In 1992, the Serbs committed genocide against the Bosnian Muslims in an act of ethnic cleansing. Over 200,000 Muslim civilians were murdered and 2 million became refugees. In 1994, the Hutu attempted to exterminate the Tutsi population in Rwanda. 800,000 persons were killed. Isn't genocide just too horrible for kids lit? Children's literature may not be the place to expound on the horrific details of ethnic cleansing, but we can still get the point across. Can we have even the youngest children consider the differences in people and that they should not lead, so it would not lead to the extermination of an entire race? Is there a way to get that point across so that even the youngest child can understand it and hopefully prevent this from continuing to happen? In the book Feathers and Fools, author Mim Book Fox does just that. Through the use of very few words and beautiful illustrations, the author tells the story for peacocks and swans. Peacocks begin to notice the differences between they and the swans, and instead of admiring the differences, they begin to fear the swans. They arm themselves, which leads the swans to follow suit. One day, a peacock sees a swan flying overhead with a small reed in its mouth it was gathering to make a nest. The peacock sounds the alarm, believing an attack is underway. Both sides take out their weapons and fight to the death until none of either bird is alive. Except after the fighting, 2 eggs hatch, one with a peacock and one with a swan. Instead of differences, they see the similarities. They go off together and live in peace and share the world. Genocide and kidlit. Looks like it's a good place to start.